So that's why I think you can't have one without the other. It's a circle. It's a continuous circle. One feeds the other, and it keeps feeding the other, and it keeps feeding the other. So.
Welcome to the Project My Life podcast from Monetti Productions.
What's up, guys? I'm back with my beautiful co-host,
Karen Monetti.
Project My Life, Finish What You Started podcast series, new season, we'll call it. And I'm excited today to talk about spiritual transformation. And we're going to do a little deep dive in what that means to me personally. Karen, if you're lucky, she's going to share some of her spiritual journey experiences recently. And yeah, that's it. Let's get into it. All right. What does spirituality mean to you, Karen?
Gosh, that's a loaded question.
That's a loaded question right off the bat.
Oh my!
But I want to start.
You put me on the hot seat.
That's all right. You can just give like a 30-second of it.
Yeah, spiritual transformation for me means working out a lot of emotions and looking to something bigger than me to help me. Yeah,
perfect. I love it. So spirituality, I mean, the only time I've said that word, which came to me oddly, believe it or not, it's a crazy story, and it'll make sense. It'll make sense. Bodybuilding.com, when it first came out, going back, I don't know how many years ago, but I was a writer for them, and I was writing, and it said like what's something that most people don't know about you or something like that. It was like a questionnaire, and I was like, I'm spiritual. And I never knew what that meant. Like I was like, I just felt like spiritual, not necessarily God or Jesus, but I just felt spiritual in general. I prayed every night. I grew up Catholic, did all my sacraments, my baptism, my communion, confirmation, went to church up until that point, and then we really didn't go to church. I always felt a little, to be honest with you, no offense to Catholicism, but a little creeped out with the organs and the atmosphere. It just felt very stuffy, really high ceilings. I felt like I was always doing something wrong. I just felt like when I was a kid, it just felt weird about it. So I told my mom about it. And she's like, well, you don't have to go to church. I also said, like, it's weird. I got to tell him what I did wrong to this guy behind the screen. Like, it was just weird, right?
I understand. So, I have the same feelings.
So I was like, Ma, one time I was like, Ma, I didn't have any sins to tell him, so I told him some of yours. She got a kick out of that. But anyway, so I wasn't really a goer of church, so to speak.
You weren't a good Catholic person.
I wasn't a good, Catholic. But what she did tell me was that you don't need to go to church to connect with God or to be, praying every night. So I used to pray, and to people who passed on, I would think that they were angels and they were like with me as their spirit, so to speak. Their spirits were with me, and their spirits were kind of like if something would happen, I'm like, oh, that's Nana, or oh, that's Uncle Frank, or whatever, as Pops. I would just feel like there was a spirit that was around me. And then again, I always kind of had my prayer, right? And that was like easy for me to surrender and understand that there's something bigger and greater than me out there, because life kind of kicks you around a little bit. And if you're not in the middle of getting kicked around, it's right around the corner. Something's going to happen. Some storm's coming up sooner or later, where you're going to be like, damn, this is not what I wanted. Why did it happen? And who's in charge of it? This is not what I planned. It's going the complete wrong way that I planned. So that's what got us going back to church recently is, yes. My dad passed, and there was some of the trauma that we had experienced in our life. And it brought us back to a place of submitting and just finding some security in something bigger than us. And I'm not telling you that some people don't believe in God. They have their thing, and their connection to a higher self, so to speak, is important to understand that you are not in control of most of things that happen in our lives. So when you understand, for me, just speaking with, being honest, when I understood that, oh shoot, like why did these things happen? It kind of just made me aware that there was something bigger and more grand. Anyway, so talk to me about your spiritual transformation, Karen, or if you want to share anything about what you've learned through your spiritual journey so far, and you want to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, well, I also grew up very Catholic. My sister and I, we would go, my parents would bring us to church every Sunday. I got baptized, confirmation, or communion, confirmation also. I stopped going to church once my sister received confirmation. She's 3 years younger than me, so I had to hang out 3 more years in church. And I have the same exact feelings. Like, I always felt very wronged, or like, I don't know, I always felt like you couldn't breathe when you were in there, because even if you sneezed, you were looked upon like, how dare you make a noise in this building, and I always felt like very rejected in the church, because I was like, not sure about this. Now, I dated somebody too when I was in high school. Sorry. There was a life.
Whoa.
And his family was so ultra Catholic that it was like you could not do anything around the family, or else they would like, the wrath of Jesus is on you.
In front of everybody?
They were just very, very, very strong Catholic people. And I used to go to church with them too, here and there. Because it was part of, so it was part of being with them. And then when I went to college, I just broke away from it all. But whenever I was going through really crappy times in my life, I would always find myself back in a church, even for like just by myself, sitting in the pews and just like looking at all the statues and thinking. So I've always had like some connection.
Safety, a place of safety for you?
Yeah, it was a place of comfort. And as crazy as that sounds, because when I was younger going to church, I felt very rigid, like this is not a good place to be. But there's something so beautiful and sacred about the building itself and the statues and all the stained glass. And I always felt at peace there.
You've gone to church by yourself?
Yeah, I have. Even when we moved to Somerville, I would go to churches randomly, by myself.
Like when nobody's in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Just sit there for like a couple minutes and just breathe, Yeah.
It feels different. There's like a sense, right?
It's just a sense of calm for me.
Yeah.
And then, again, I've always felt like there was something bigger. I've always been very visual and very connected to something that was higher than me, because I've had visions that have come to like fruition, like identically how I saw them, which is really creepy, but also really cool. So I just have to work on this more to visualize exactly what I want. So I've always been like that. And then right before your father passed, I started finding a need for something deeper, because I was just never feeling satisfied. Like, business is good, we have a house, we have a great relationship, great family, but I always felt like something was missing. And I had conversations with somebody from church who, we weren't at this church at the time, and he did this wheel for me. He's like, people get to this part of life where they're set financially, they're good, with physical self, with relationships, but there's always this one piece of the pie that's missing in most people, and that was spirituality. I was like, that makes sense. So then he turned me onto a couple podcasts, and that's how I found Liquid. I found them through him, through this podcast. I started listening. I'm like, wow, these messages are like amazing. I've never remembered church ever being like this.
That's another thing. Shout out, not to cut you off, please. Remember that thought.
Yeah, shout out to Liquid Church.
Yeah, because I mean,
Totally.
Again, I've never been to a Christian-based church. I always seen like the Christian churches where like people are just dancing and having a good time. Like, wow, that looks super fun. That's not like what I used to be going to, right? So that looks like fun, right? Yeah. So we go to Liquid, and there's like dude with a backwards hat on or forward hat, whatever. He's got a hat on, which is you don't do that in church. Flannel with a pair of like Vans or a pair of like sneakers on, just
on
like
a guitar.
Like, wow, it's got a good beat to it. It's like, okay, cool. I can get down with it. And the messages are like relatable to like real life stuff. Because I've read the Bible before. I need an interpreter. I need somebody to help me kind of dissect those words. And sometimes it makes sense. But I understand like when they kind of bring it to, this is not a paid for podcast by Liquid, but but they kind of make the messages make sense to what we're going through in real life. And that's what I like about it.
Sure. It's relatable.
Sorry to cut you
and
off.
That is part of our spiritual transformation, because they are bringing for us God and the higher being of that, and there's something outside of us controlling all this. They're bringing that thought into our everyday life, like how you can bring your spiritual life into your work or into your relationships, into your family, into like how you drive in traffic, which I'm still working on. That's not a good one for me.
Or technology.
Or technology. I got to bring Jesus into those things for me. But it's really great. And I did find Liquid through the podcast. I was like, wow, these messages are great. Like, again, I've never been to a church, or I've never heard messages like this. I want more. And when they came out, I started going online. Because you were working on Sundays a period of time. I was like, well, I got nothing else to do. Let me hop onto Liquid
And what did
online.
I do?
Well, wait, I was doing online. I'm like, this is really amazing. And then when Somerville campus opened up again, I was like, Aunt, would you want to come to church with me? Because I really feel like I'm being pulled. Like I need something more in my life. And you said yes. And then we closed the studio on Sundays and now we go to church on Sundays and that's become our day. And yeah, that's part of my transformation. It's literally going through the process of that and just finding how I connect now to something bigger than me and how I connect it every day in my life. And it has literally been life changing. And this is just from my perspective. We've gone through a lot. There was a lot of loss in the past couple of years. I've lost grandmothers. I've lost there's just been a lot of darkness between COVID and the shutdown and financial stuff and losing your father, which was like a huge piece of my heart too, because he was my dude. He really was my dude. I'm going to get emotional because I really miss him. But anyway, if it wasn't for finding something bigger than me, I don't think I would be in such a good place right now where I am, solid, I know, I'm sorry.
I'm not crying. No, really though, I'm very, I let it ride when those emotions come. And when you talk about spirituality, do you think that my dad's spirit is floating around?
Sure, I see it every day.
And I don't know where that, people don't think that, yes.
Pops, you are here.
No, but really though, certain things have happened after he passed. I go hiking every Saturday with my buddy. And no matter what the weather is, we get bundled up and we go hiking. My dad passed away on a Wednesday. That Saturday, he's like, oh man, do you still want to go? I'm like, absolutely. I need to be in the woods. I need to be connecting with you and I need some fellowship and I want to do it. So he calls me. He's like, bro, you got to come pick me up. I can't get out of my driveway. I can't get out of my street. I'm like, what are you talking about? A tree had fallen. It wasn't windy. There was no storms, nothing. There was a massive tree that fell down and as soon as you got into his street. So I can get to his street, but he couldn't get off of the street because there was a tree there. So I rolled up and I was like, dude, that's my dad. That's my dad just either busting our chops or letting us know. I don't know. I mean, you could look for things like that. Or you can just brush it off like it's nothing. But when these things kind of happen, there was a huge fire. Remember when
the day of his funeral,
his wake.
That's right.
There was a huge not that he was he wasn't a pyro.
He's a fire starter,
right?
Though
But
he's got energy.
the Home Depot was on fire. The Lowe's was on fire.
Yeah,
and half of the neighborhood,
half the parkways were shut down.
People couldn't get to the wake because the whole town was basically on fire.
Yeah, so we say Pops went out with a blaze.
I mean, and again, when you talk about spirituality, I always thought that there was spirits around, more so take God and Jesus out of it and bring it more to a spirit about you, who you are. What is your higher self look like? If you were looking down on how you were kind of functioning and what you were doing, would you approve of what you were doing, so to speak? So again, spirituality comes from within. You can pull it from church, you can pull it from Jesus or God or Buddha or I don't know how many other religions are out there, but whatever it is, there's something higher than you that created you and made you be here. Again, I can go really deep with this. This is personal podcast, that's what it's all about. My mom and dad had a lot of trouble trying to have a family. Their first I've talked about this in the past, actually a couple months ago when it was, pregnancy.
It was infant loss and pregnancy loss awareness.
Infertility or something like that.
We did something for your mom.
Right. My mom's my parents, their first baby was born 4 hours later, as you know. My dad's coming back in to with my grandfather because the baby was named after him. And the nurse said, your baby expired 4 hours after the baby was born. So my parents were 22, 23. How do you fathom that? 4 hours old, the baby just dies. So anyway, I had my brother and he's healthy. Thank God. And he's here. And then after that, it was 14 years. My mom had 2 miscarriages. She had another stillborn baby, which stillborn means the baby was born or died after 12 weeks old, basically. Yeah. So basically, the baby died in my mom's womb after 12 weeks old.
I think it was 20 weeks. It was
far along.
Weeks or something. Yeah,
so that would be called a stillborn, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the doctors are like, you just be happy that you have a healthy baby.
And what did your mom say?
I'm not giving up. And she
I
also
will have
said,
a baby if I'm 90 years old.
Right.
And that reminds us of like parts of the Bible.
Right.
Because she's very spiritual, Mama. Duke's
so
over there.
she would, and here I am today. And yeah, I mean, why am I here? Why didn't that first baby live? Or I don't know. I get weird. I'll go down a rabbit hole with that. And I look up at the stars going, what are we doing here with this life? And why am I here? What's my purpose? Anyway, so yeah, spirituality is a deep topic.
It's very deep. We can have like hours upon
hours.
I'm
vibing
but it does mean connecting, and it, again, it's letting go of all control.
It's liberating. It's liberating too,
which is really hard because as humans we want to control everything. Like a lot of us want to control like everything, right? And you always say it, even here in the studio. There's only 3 things that we can control, like in ourselves right now, is what we eat, right? Like what we're feeding ourselves. How we move our bodies, as long as there's no like physical challenges. And even if there is, maybe there's some things we can do. And then how we react and think about things, right? But outside of that, everything else is out of our control as much as we try to maintain that control. So I think also part of the spiritual transformation is letting go of that control and just being the best version of yourself to put like the ripple effect to everybody else, and your vibration goes out there and changes other people, and just being a good human being, like a decent human being, and letting go of control and doing the best you can.
I love it. There is, some tie-ins to all we've been talking about with these other podcasts about emotional, emotional, healthy spirituality is a series that our church did, and it really I found it super interesting. And it brought it back down to a family of origin, basically, how you were brought up, how your parents were brought up, how their parents were brought up. And all those generations lead to who you are today and how you interact and how you express your emotions, how you feel emotions, what you do about them, how you communicate them. And it was really powerful.
That was a good series.
Just random thought, because we were talking about emotional stuff
But earlier. A lot of that helps us transform everything, our emotions, our mental, and our physical, is by digging deep. Who are we? Where do we come from? What beliefs were we told as a child? What beliefs were we told from our parents, from our teachers, from the doctors, from anybody? So the transformation, it's all combined. Physical, emotional, and spiritual, it's all one and the same. Because without one, you can't do the other fully. You can't just work on the physical and not work on the habits and the emotion and the viewpoints and the reactions and the spiritual of it. You just can't. And you can't only work on the mental and say, well, today I feel really good and I feel lean today. But without taking the action and actually meal prepping, eating better, or exercising, it's not going to happen either. So that's why I think you can't have one without the other. It's a circle. It's a continuous circle. One feeds the other, and it keeps feeding the other, and it keeps feeding the other. So interesting
stuff. What do you feel like any obstacles came in your way, or that you see from a spiritual standpoint, Karen?
Trust.
Yeah,
I think it is an obstacle because, again, as humans, we want control, and when things don't go right, it's like, why me? And then how can I trust that anything's good is gonna come out of this? And the negative emotion comes in, why, if there is a God and he's all loving, why is this happening to me right now? But again, that's not how this works. It's part of the spiritual growth, I think. But I think that's a big obstacle personally for me, is just having full trust, knowing that even in the darkest and blackest moments of my life, if I still trust, I will get through it. Because how many bad moments in anybody's life has anybody ever had, and I'm still here, right? Are you still here after you've gone through something not so great? So I think just having
it's interesting because we can go down a rabbit hole, and we can probably make another couple podcasts over this,
probably 365 one for every day.
If you want to dive deep, because some of the Bible stuff, I'm not saying that I'm all bought into some of the Bible stuff, because it gets a little bit confusing, number one. Number two, sometimes it's I have to really, because some of the it's fiction. If we were to read it, it's fiction. I don't read fiction besides the Bible. My books are nonfiction. They're business books. They're self-help books. They're
the Bible is nonfiction. It's not fiction.
Well, okay, you're right. But nobody has gone back to prove those things right. With some kind of
documents.
There's what?
The Bible is a historical document.
I agree, but sometimes it's interpreted by different people taking different parts of the Bible, right? So I'm giving you the flip side of it, and I've even with the men's study group, I'm like, help me with this one, guys, because I'm struggling with aliens, and I'm struggling with different parts of the country, and how like there's different nationalities. If it was only Adam and Eve, like are we all? Is there a lot of incest going on? Because if it started with two people and so these are all questions that I have. Again, I'm not trying to bore people with it, but if you were to dive deep into the Bible, it's a little confusing, and it's basically interpretations of what went on and how we should live our life. So again, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but yeah.
Where were you going with that?
Because to say that,
does anybody know? Can we get a life?
We were talking about, well, if you mentioned something about the Bible, and I wanted to touch upon how like some of the things that are very confusing to me. And if somebody were to think that spirituality is based upon everything in the Bible, then, and that's what you're saying basically, right? Not everything, but it's like a rule book, right?
For our belief system,
right,
in the Christianity and Catholicism and stuff, yeah.
And some of those things you have to use your imagination with.
Sure,
and
you have to have faith. It's called faith.
All right. Well,
not
I get it.
imagination. It's called faith.
I got it. I'm a believer.
Yeah,
I
understand. And again, yeah, I think I know where you're going. Let me see if this is right. You don't have to read the Bible in order to be spiritual. And spiritual doesn't only mean that. Like there's many different aspects and layers of spirituality also. Is that what you were trying to say?
Yes.
Okay.
In so many ways, but
I know you.
All right, guys, that was heavy stuff.
Oh, my ears are on
I hope
fire.
you're still listening, and if you're not, awesome. And if you are, follow us on Instagram somewhere. I'm Anthony Monetti, Monetti. Karen is Karen _ Monetti. That's usually the best place to connect to us. Share us your opinions, but only the positive stuff. I got no room in my life for any bullshit negative stuff, so keep that to yourself. Praise us and how good we are at what we do. And I'm only kidding. Real talk though, guys. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. For more information, visit our website at thisisbody.com. That's thisisbodhi.com.